Good morning, Miss Hicks's class. We will continue the Tiger Rising. Chapter 14. The cage was made out of rusted chain link fence. There was a wood board that served as a roof, and there was a chain link door that was locked tight with 3 padlocks. Inside the cage, the tiger was still pacing back and forth, just as he had been the last time Rob saw him, as if he had never stopped pacing, or as if Rob had never gone away. "Oh," said Sistine in the same voice that she had used when she saw Rob's carvings. "He's beautiful." "Don't get too close," Rob ordered. "He might not like it if you stand too close to him." But the tiger ignored them. He concentrated on pacing. He was so enormous and bright that it was hard to look directly at him. "It's just like the poem says," Sistine breathed. "What?" said Rob. "The poem. The one that goes, 'Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night.' That poem is just like that. He burns bright." "Oh," said Rob. He nodded. He liked the fierce and beautiful way the words sound. Just as he was getting ready to ask Simone to say them again, she whirled around and faced him. "What's he doing way out here?" she demanded. Rob shrugged. "I don't know," he said. "He's Bucamps, I guess." "Bucamp what? His pet?" "I don't know," said Rob. "I just like looking at him. Maybe Bucamp does too. Maybe he just likes to come out here and look at him." "That's selfish," said Sistine. Rob shrugged. "This isn't right for this tiger to be in a cage. It's not right." "We can't do nothing about it," Rob said. "We could let him go," said Sistine. "We could set him free." She put her hands on her hips. It was a gesture that Rob had already come to recognize and be wary of. "We can't. There's all them locks." "We can saw through them." "Nah," said Rob. The mere thought of letting the tiger go made his legs itch like crazy. "We have to set him free," Sistine said. Her voice was loud and certain. It ain't our tiger to let go. It's our tiger to save," Sistine said fiercely. The tiger stopped pacing. He pricked his ears back and forth, looking somewhere past Sistine and Rob. "Shh," said Rob. The tiger cocked its head. All 3 of them listened. "It's a car. A car's coming. It's Bucamp. We got to go. Come on." He grabbed her hand and pulled her into the woods. She ran with him. She let him hold onto her hand. It was impossibly small and bony, as delicate as the skeleton of a baby bird. They ran together, and Rob felt his heart move inside him, not from fear or exertion, but from something else. It was as if his soul had grown and was pushing everything up higher in his body. It was an odd, familiar feeling, but he couldn't remember what it was called. "Is he behind us?" Sistine asked, breathlessly. Rob shrugged. It was hard to move his shoulder up and down and keep hold of Sistine's hand at the same time. Sistine said, "Stop shrugging your shoulders at me. I hate it. I hate the way you shrug all the time." And that made Rob remember Willie Mays saying that when he shrugged, he looked like a skinny bird trying to fly. It struck him as funny. He laughed out loud at the thought, and without asking him what he was laughing about, without dropping his hand, without stopping, Sistine laughed too. Then Rob remembered the name of the feeling that was pushing up against him, filling him full to overflow. It was happiness. That was what it was called. Chapter 15. By the time they made it back to the motel parking lot, it was dark outside, and they were both laughing so hard they could barely walk. "Rob," said his father. He was standing at the door to their room. The blue-gray light from inside seeped out around him. "Yes, sir," said Rob. He dropped Sistine's hand, and he stood up straight. "Where have you been?" "Out in the woods." "Did you finish all them jobs I told you to do?" "Yes, sir." "Who you got with you?" His father said, squinting into the darkness. Sistine drew herself up tall. "This is Sistine." "Uh-huh," still squinting. "You live around here?" he asked. "For now," said Sistine. "Your parents know you're out here?" "I was going to call my mother," said Sistine. "There's a payphone down in the laundry room," said Rob's father. "In the laundry room?" Sistine repeated, her voice full of disbelief. She put her hands on her hips. "We don't got a phone in the room," Rob said to her softly. "Good grief. Well, can I have some change at least?" Rob's father reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of coins. He balanced the money in the palm of his hand, as if he was preparing to do a magic trick. Rob stepped forward and took the coins from him and handed them to Sistine. "You want me to go with you?" he asked her. "No, I'll find it. Thank you very much." "Rob," his father said as Sistine marched away, swinging her arms, "what's that girl doing in your clothes?" "She had a dress on," Rob said. "It was too pretty to wear out in the woods." "Come on in here. Let's get the medicine on your legs." "Yes, sir," said Rob. He walked towards the room. His happiness had evaporated. His legs itched, and the motel room, he knew, would be as dark as a cave, lit only by the gray light of the TV. When his mother was alive, the world had seemed full of light. Christmas before she died, she had strung the outside of their house in Jacksonville with hundreds of white lights. Every night, the house lit up like a constellation, and they were all inside it together, the three of them, and they were happy. Rob remembered, and as he remembered, he stepped into the motel room. He shook his head and scolded himself for opening a suitcase. Just thinking about all those things that were gone now seemed to make the darkness darker. Chapter 16. Rob sat out on the curb in front of the motel room and waited for Sistine to come back from using the phone. He had her green dress wrapped up in a grocery bag. He had tried to fold the dress up neatly, but folding a dress turned out to be an impossible task, and he finally gave up. Now he held the bag out and away from him so that the grease from his medication on his legs wouldn't stain it. He was relieved when Sistine finally walked towards him out of the darkness. "Hey," he said. "Hi." She sat down on the step next to him. "How come you don't have a phone?" Rob shrugged. "Ain't got nobody to call, I guess." "My mother's coming to get me," Sistine said. Rob nodded. "Here's your dress." He handed her the bag. Sistine took it and then tilted her head to look up at the sky. Rob looked up too. The clouds had shifted. There were clear patches where the stars shone through. "I can see the Big Dipper," Sistine said. "I like looking up at things. So do my mom and dad. That's how they met." They were both looking up at the ceiling in the Sistine Chapel, and they weren't watching where they were going. And they bumped into each other. "That's why my name is Sistine." "I like your name," Rob said shyly. "I've seen the Sistine Chapel, too. They took me last year, before Bridget, when they were still in love." "Does it look like the pictures?" Rob asked. "Better," said Sistine. "It's like, I don't know. It's like looking at fireworks, kind of." "Oh," said Rob. "Maybe we could go to Italy sometime, and I could show you." "That would be all right," said Rob. He smiled into the darkness. "That cat can't look up at the stars," said Sistine, her voice getting hard. He's got that piece of wood over his head. Can't look up at all. We've got to go get him and let him go." Rob was silent. He was hoping if he didn't answer her, she might go back to talking about the Sistine Chapel. "How did your mother die?" she asked suddenly. Rob sighed. He knew there was no point in trying not to answer. "Cancer," he said. "What was her name?" "I ain't supposed to talk about her," said Rob, closing his eyes to the stars and concentrating instead on his suitcase and working to keep it closed. "Why not?" asked Sistine. "Because. My dad says it don't do no good to talk about it. He says she's gone and she ain't coming back. That's why we moved here from Jacksonville, because everybody always wanted to talk about her. We moved down here to get on with things." There was the crunch on the gravel. Rob opened his eyes in time to see the headlights of a car sweep over them. "That's my mother," said Sistine. She stood up. "Quick, tell me your mother's name." Rob shook his head. "Say it," she demanded. "Caroline," Rob said softly, cracking his suitcase open and letting the words slip out. Sistine gave him another nod of her head. "Okay, I'll come back tomorrow, and we'll make our plans for letting the tiger go." "Sissy," called a voice. "Baby, what in the world are you doing out here?" Sistine's mother got out of the car and came walking towards them. She had on high heels, and she wobbled as she walked in the gravel parking lot of the Kentucky Star. Her hair was a lighter shade of yellow than Sistine's and piled up high. When she turned her head, Rob recognized Sistine's profile, her sharp chin and pointed nose, but the mouth was different, tighter. "Good Lord," said Miss Bailey to Sistine. "What have you got on?" "Clothes," said Sistine. "Sissy, you look like a hobo. Get in the car." She tapped her high-heeled foot on the ground. Sistine didn't move. She stood behind Rob. "Well," said her mother when Sistine didn't move, "you must be Rob. What's your last name, Rob?" "Horton," said Rob. "Horton," said Miss Bailey. "Horton. Are you related to Sheldon Horton, the congressman?" "No, ma'am," said Rob. "I don't think so." Miss Bailey's eyes flicked away from him and back to Sistine. "Baby," said Miss Bailey, "please get in the car." When Sistine still didn't move, Miss Bailey sighed and looked back at Rob again. "She won't listen to a word I say," Miss Bailey said. "Her father is the only one she listens to." And then, under her breath, she muttered, "Her father, the liar." Sistine growled somewhere deep in her throat and stalked to the car, got in, and slammed the door. "You're the liar," she shouted from the back of the back seat. "You're the one who lies." "Jesus," said Miss Bailey. She shook her head and turned and walked back to the car without saying anything else to Rob. Rob watched them pull away. He could see Sistine sitting in the back seat. Her shoulders were slumped. The motel room door slammed. Somebody laughed. A dog barked once, short and high, and then stopped. And then there was silence. "Caroline," Rob whispered in the darkness. "Caroline, Caroline, Caroline." The word was as sweet as forbidden candy on his tongue. Chapter 17. The next morning, Rob was helping Willie Mays in the laundry room. They were folding sheets and chewing 8-ball gum. All night he tossed and turned, scratching his legs and thinking about the tiger and what Sistine said, that he had to be set free. She had finally decided to get Willie Mays' opinion. "You ever go to a zoo?" Rob asked. "One time," said Willie Mays. She cracked her gum. "We went to that zoo over in Sorley. Place stunk. Do you think them animals minded it, being locked up? Wasn't nobody asking them did they mind, Willie Mays pulled another sheet out of the dryer and snapped it open. Rob tried again. Do you think it's bad to keep animals locked up? Willie Mays turned to him over the top of her glasses. She stared at him hard. Rob looked down at his feet. When I wasn't but little, my daddy bought me a bird in a cage. It was a green parakeet bird. The bird was so small, I could hold it right in the palm of my hand. She draped the sheet over one shoulder and held out a cupped hand to show Rob. It looked to him like a hand big enough to hold the entire world. Held him in my hand, could feel his little heart beating. He would look at me, cock his head this way and that. Called him Cricket on account of him all the time singing. What happened to him? Rob said. Willie May bent and took a pillowcase out of the dryer. Let him go, she said. You let him go? Rob repeated, his heart sinking inside of him like a stone. Couldn't stand seeing him locked up, so I let him go. And then what happened? I got beat by my daddy. He said I didn't do that bird no favor. He said all I did was give some snake a supper. So you never saw him again? Rob asked. Said Willie Mays, but sometimes he comes flying through my dreams, splitting about and singing. She shook her head and reached for the sheet on his shoulder. Here, go on and grab hold of the other end. Help me fold this up. Rob took hold of the sheet. As it billowed out between them, a memory rose up before him. His father standing out in the yard, holding his gun up to the sky, taking aim on a bird. You think I can't hit it? His father said. You think I can't hit that itty-bitty bird? Robert, what do you want to shoot the bird for? To prove I can, said his father. There was a single crack, and the bird was suspended in mid-air, pinned for a moment to the sky with his father's bullet. Then it fell. Oh, Robert, his mother said. It hurt the back of Rob's throat to think about that now, to think about the gun and his mother and the small thud the bird made when it hit the ground. I know something that's in a cage, said Robert, putting the words past the tightness in his throat. Willie May nodded her head, but she wasn't listening. She was looking past Rob, past the white sheet, past the laundry room, past the Kentucky Star. Who don't, she said finally, who don't know something in a cage? After that, they folded the sheets in silence. Rob thought about the bird and how when he finally found its small, still warm body, he had started to cry. His father told him not to. It ain't nothing to cry over. It's just a bird. Chapter 18. Rob kept sweeping the cement side walkway in front of the Kentucky Star rooms when Bucamp pulled up in his red Jeep and honked the horn. Hey there, he hollered. Bucamp was a large man with orange hair and an orange beard and a permanent toothpick in the side of his mouth. The toothpick waggled as he talked, as if it was trying to make a point of its own. We got you on the payroll now, too? Bucamp shouted. No, sir, said Rob. All right, hooted Bucamp. He hopped out of the Jeep. Got you working for free. That's what I like to hear. Yes, sir, said Rob. Aren't you supposed to be in school, or you done graduated already? The gold chains buried deep in Bucamp's orange chest hair winked at Rob. I'm sick, said Rob. Sick and tired of school, right? He slapped Rob on the back. Don't got a mama putting down the rules for you, do you? Go get to make your own rules, not me. He jerked his head in the direction of the motel office, where his mother, Ida Bell, worked the front desk. He winked at Rob and then looked to the left and the right. Look here, he said in a quieter voice. I got me a number of deals going on right now, a few more than I can properly handle. I wonder if a smart boy like you wouldn't be looking for a way to pick up extra spending money." He didn't wait for Rob to answer. "Let me tell you what I got cooking. You like animals?" Rob nodded. "Of course you do. What boy don't? They like wild animals." Rob's heart skipped. He suddenly knew where Bucamp was headed. "I got me a wild animal," said Bucamp. "I got me a wild animal like you would not believe. Right here on my property. And I got some plans for him, big plans. But in the meantime, he needs some taking care of, some daily maintenance. You follow me, son?" "Yes, sir," said Rob. "All right." He slapped Rob on the shoulder again. "Why don't you climb on into this Jeep and let me take you for a ride and show you what I'm talking about?" "I'm supposed to be sweeping," said Rob. He held up his broom. "Says who?" And Bucamp suddenly angry. "Your daddy? He ain't the boss. I'm the boss. And if I say let's go, you say all right." "All right," said Rob. He looked over his shoulder, wishing fervently that Willie May or his father would appear to save him from Bucamp, knowing at the same time that he could not be saved and that he was on his own. "Good. Climb on up." Rob climbed into the passenger seat. There was a big brown grocery bag at his feet. "Go on and put that in the back." The bag was heavy and stunk. Rob carefully put it on the floor in the back and then noticed his hands. There was blood on his fingers. "That's just from the meat," said Bucamp. "It won't hurt you none." He cranked the engine, it roared to life, and they went tearing around behind the Kentucky Star and into the woods. Bucamp drove like he was crazy. He gunned for trees and then swerved away from them at the last minute, whooping and hollering the whole time. "You ain't gonna believe what I gotta show you," Bucamp hollered at him. "No, sir," said Rob weakly. "What?" "No, sir," Rob shouted back. "I ain't gonna believe it." But he did believe it. He believed it with all of his heart. Chapter 19. Bucamp hit the brakes. "We're almost there. You gotta close your eyes so it's a surprise. Don't cheat now. Keep them eyes closed." "Yes, sir," Rob said. "All right," Bucamp said finally. "Go on and open 'em up." He had pulled the Jeep up as close to the tiger cage as possible without driving into it. "Tell me what you see," he crowed. "Tell me what is before your very eyes." "A tiger," said Rob. He let his mouth drop open. He tried to look excited and amazed. "Damn straight. King of the jungle. And he's all mine." "Wow. You own him?" "That's right," said Bucamp. "Fellow I know owed me some money. Paid me with the tiger. That's the way real men do business. In tigers. He comes complete with the cage." The toothpick at the side of his mouth danced up and down. Bucamp put a finger up to steady it in silence. "What are you going to do with him?" Rob asked. "I'm studying my options. I figure I could set him up in front of the Kentucky Star, have him draw some more business into the motel." The tiger stood and stared at Bucamp. Bucamp looked away from him. He tapped his thick finger on the steering wheel. "I also might just kill him," Bucamp said, "and skin him and make me a tiger coat. I ain't making up my mind. He's a lot of work, I tell you that. He needs meat twice a day. That's where you come in. I need you to come out here and feed him. $2 every time you do it. How does that sound?" "How do I get the meat to the cage?" Bucamp dug in his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. "With these," he said. He shook the keys and gave them a sad jingle. Don't pay no attention to the big keys. They're for the locks on the door. Open them up and the tiger should get out and eat you for sure. You understand? I ought not to give you this whole set, but I know you won't open up that door, right? You ain't no fool, right? Rob, terrified that keys to the cage existed and that they were about to be handed to him, nodded. See this tiny key? That's for the food door right there. You can't point it to a small door at the bottom of the cage. You just open that up and toss the meat in a piece at a time, like this. Bucamp swung himself out of the Jeep with a grunt. He reached in the back seat for the grocery bag, took out a piece of meat, bent over, unlocked the tiny door, opened it, and threw the meat in. The tiger leapt forward, and Bucamp took a quick step backwards, stumbling. That's all there is to it, he said, straightening himself. His forehead was shiny with sweat, and his hands were trembling. What's the tiger's name? Rob asked. Name? He ain't got no name. You got to name something before you toss it a piece of meat? Rob shrugged and blushed. He bent over to scratch his legs so that he wouldn't have to look at Mr. Bucamp's sweaty, angry face. You want to get introduced proper? Well then, get on out of the Jeep. Rob climbed up. Bucamp grabbed hold of the fence and shook it. The tiger looked up from his meat. His muzzle was red with blood. He stared at Bucamp with a fierce look in his eyes that was familiar to Rob. Hey, you see this guy here? He pointed to Rob. He's your meal ticket, not me. It's the boy. He's got the keys now. Understand? I don't got them no more. This boy's got them. He's your boy. Tiger stared at Bucamp a minute more. Then he slowly lowered his head and started back to work on the meat. How do you know each other? Said Bucamp. He pulled a tattered bandana from his pocket and wiped the sweat off. On the hair-raising ride back to Kentucky Star, Bob realized that the tiger's stare reminded him of it was Sistine. He knew that when he told her she had the keys to the cage, her eyes would glow with the same fierce light. He knew that she would insist that now they had the right to let the tiger go. Okay, we will start on chapter 20 the next time you guys have library. Have a great Thanksgiving.